Hi, everybody. It's Susan again, and this time we're having a look at the Scorpio new moon coming up on the 1st of November. It's a really interesting day, all in all, because not only is the new moon highly aspected, but also it happens to be also the Day of the Dead and Diwali, or Deepavali, which is the Festival of Lights. Deepa means light, and so does Jyoti, and Jyotish is the study of light. So it's an interesting day, all in all. Really, the meaning of Deepavali or Diwali is to celebrate the success or the winning of the battle of darkness, and the overcoming the darkness and moving towards the light. This is from the story of the Ramayana in the Indian epic of Rama and his pursuit of awareness, which is a really interesting theme for us right now, because I think this is really where this moon is pulling us. Certainly globally, there will be some serious outer tension. That's not news. It's just that it's likely to flare up, I'd say, around the new moon. And there are some really interesting potentials for negotiation or potentials for discussions, but they may not really come to fruition. But we'll have a look at that in a moment. The new moon itself is at 9 degrees, 35 minutes of Scorpio, and it's at 12:47 in universal time. So you have to add or subtract accordingly. So just after noon, universal time. And yeah, actually, this is the reflection of the chart of the new moon, as I always bring up the universal time chart, since you're coming from all over the world. And hello to all of you all over the world, and especially to my new subscribers. Thank you for joining me here. This particular chart has a Capricorn ascendant, and then, of course, that puts the lunation in the 11th house. So we'll look at that. So it's very important for us in this particular moment because this is where we're having the very last opposition between Pluto and Mars. So Mars being in the seventh, Pluto being in the first. And I think this really aptly describes us collectively as well. There's quite a large influence of tension around our notions of security. And of course, that axis of Capricorn and Cancer is about family. It's about emotional security. It's about responsibility. It's about nurturance. And there's tension in all of those domains. And that includes within countries as well as between countries, and of course, perhaps in our individual lives as well. So we'll look at all of that sign by sign shortly. Um, all of this to say that this energy of Scorpio is always going to be intense. That's a word that, of course, everybody likes to use with Scorpio. I apologize in advance if I use it a lot during this video. Scorpio is intense because often what it is things are under the surface. And so we're feeling them rather than being fully aware of them. And in fact, that's often why very scorpionic people are considered to be very intense, because there's a lot that's not revealed on the surface. And often they withhold themselves, they withhold it could be their opinions or their personal information, or they withhold their motivations. That's a frequent one. And so people may feel a little uncomfortable because what seems to be happening on the surface doesn't feel like what is happening energetically. So this is part of the dynamic of Scorpio. It's part of getting close to what is real. And that truth is also a factor in Pluto as well, getting close to the truth. What is real? What is true? And indeed, we even have Mercury in Scorpio at the same time, and Mercury is sextiling Pluto. It's in a trine, though, to Neptune, and it's also trining Mars. So, not so sure we're going to get to the truth at this particular time. There may be some deep emotional eruptions that can come up. That can also be very constructive, by the way. So, especially personally, we shouldn't be afraid of this kind of energy because it can be incredibly, really, really helpful, really useful for personal growth, personal transformation. Often with Pluto in opposition, we see things that we don't really like about ourselves. And so that's often why it's really unpleasant, or why people avoid doing the deeper work of Pluto, because often we have to confront things that we're not really comfortable in our own nature. Now, this can also be collectively, certainly, I think in this moment in time, we need to really explore what's going on collectively and what makes us uncomfortable about that, and be really honest about it. Mars in opposition to Pluto may have us believing that it's about somebody else, about the enemy, let's say. But we always have to look inward whenever we're pointing fingers of blame. So three fingers pointing back at us. So we always have to look inward and try to understand where have we participated in something that doesn't feel comfortable. This is one of the things about Pluto, which is actually very constructive and empowering when we overcome fear, which again Scorpio represents. It represents this fear of the deeper, darker, unknown places and having to go through it, having to, overcome, let's say. Keeping a cool head in times of crisis, for example, is a great Scorpio attribute. You definitely want Scorpios around in a hospital emergency room or as a paramedic or a soldier, for example. But you, with the Pluto there in this sextile, especially to Mercury, we really have to look inward at our own, perhaps darkness, at our own, what we need to reveal, let's say, about what we don't like about ourselves, and recognizing that there's certain things that we project then onto others. And that's the famous shadow aspect of Pluto. Revealing the shadow is one of the Plutonian sort of keywords. And same with Scorpio, because Scorpio is all these things that are hidden. It's our unconscious mind, it's our unconscious motivations, and things that we're not really sure why we're doing them. But because Taurus and Scorpio is the axis of security, especially financial security, but also emotional security, what we are able to possess and control. With Scorpio, often what it is that there's a fear of losing control, there's a fear of losing security, a fear of not being able to trust. And insofar as one doesn't trust either an individual or life itself, then you end up with this situation where you struggle to control the world around you. You struggle to make things appear the way that you would like them to appear, or you control in relationships, or you control maybe even the words that you speak. That's a Mercury and Scorpio kind of thing. Things may not be exactly as they appear on the surface. And with the Mercury in a trine to Mars, there can be some agitation that's expressed, including that trine to Neptune. It can have a very strong softening quality, but it can have a deceptive quality as well. So we are in interesting times. Mercury is opposing Uranus. It has just completed an exact opposition. It's moving out of an opposition with Uranus and Taurus, now backing up to just beyond 26 degrees, 2552 of Taurus. So there's a lot of things that can erupt or be spoken about or be said a little bit off the cuff, things that may not be what we wanted to reveal, or things that need to be revealed that are uncomfortable to reveal, or things that get revealed that are actually really beneficial, really good to actually pull these things up. So there's actually a sextile between Mars and Uranus. It's not showing up on this chart, but it's definitely there. And that creates a kind of a mystic rectangle. So that's quite interesting in and of itself, because that also means that something here about the shock and the change, this propulsion for transformation, perhaps based in something that's confrontational or based in something that's quite challenging personally or collectively, it's also part of understanding this deeper understanding of where we're going. And then, of course, we do, of course, have that grand water trine that perpetuates through the days around the moon, leading up to it and moving out of the lunation. So only on the 4th of November, Universal Time, is Mars moving into Leo. So we're holding on to this Cancer theme for another, say, 3 days ish after the lunation. So it's still very strong. And then Pluto itself doesn't move out of Capricorn until the 19th of November. So this pattern remains kind of in orb. It's only Mercury that moves away. Mercury is going to shift out of Scorpio 2 days later. So it's a subtle but lasting energy that builds a couple of days before the 1st of November, and that's maybe 3, 4 days after. The orb of opposition between Pluto and Mars, or Mars in opposition to Pluto, is is active, however, really strongly active. I'd say from now, I'm filming this. No, I'm not filming this. I'm recording this on the 20th of October. And so yeah, I'm going to say that we are already there, but the last week of October, very powerfully so. And then I would give it even the first 2 weeks of November, while Mars is moving so slowly because Mars is preparing to retrograde. And when Mars prepares to retrograde, it's a bit of a drama queen. It goes weeks and very, very slowly plodding through. Will become an even bigger drama queen when it moves into Leo, where it picks up a little bit of dignity and loves to be seen. So we'll talk about that actual aspect in another video, but I just want you to keep that in mind at this time because it's very much a part of this new moon. And this is the only opposition that we're getting at this time between Pluto and Mars in Capricorn and Cancer. It's never going to happen again in our lifetimes. So we're changing. These are, of course, dynamic times, very important times, but the fact that there's a theme around recognizing our personal growth and transformation through Diwali, for example, but also through Samhain, which is, or Samhain, depending how you say it, which is one of the cross-quarter days. It's a pagan holiday or pagan celebration or Celtic celebration from ancient times, which marks the more or less the midpoint between the equinox and the solstice. So at the equinox in Libra, we're now 6 weeks out roughly, and then we're about 6 weeks away from the winter or the vernal no, sorry, the winter solstice. It's a summer solstice for those of you in the southern hemisphere. So we're also at a shifting point. It's a turning of the energies in general. So it's a seasonal thing as well as a personal thing. So it's just a coincidence, but again, when we look at the stars, things are very rarely simply coincidental. These are coinciding in the sense that they're happening at the same time, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have deeper meaning that we should pick up in terms of the significance of the 1st of November, which is the Day of the Dead, of course. And we recognize that, or All Saints' Day, as it's known in many countries, especially in the Catholic countries, Le Toussaint in French, and that is where we can really honor who has passed already, people we know, people we didn't know. The spirits and the spirit realm is very strong at this moment. And as I mentioned, this Venus in the 12th house, which is the house of our ancestors. And she's in opposition to Jupiter, which is retrograding at 20 degrees of 2026 of Gemini, in this case, in the 6th house. This is the healing axis. It's an axis of where we recognize how we need to heal. And with Jupiter ruling that Venus in the 12th house, we can certainly do a bit of spiritual work. That's what Jupiter does represent anyway, our depth of understanding, our capacity to use knowledge and be aware of what is true, what is not true. Again, the scorpionic theme and the Plutonian theme as well. So there's a lot of dynamism here that I find on a personal level can lead to just immense growth. And we also have, a new moon, meaning that there's a potential for a new beginning. So of course, there was the full moon in Scorpio on the 24th of April. It was just a couple of days after we had that big conjunction in Taurus with Uranus and Jupiter. April was a very significant month, and Chiron is kind of close anyway to where it was. I think it's even exactly where it was going direct around the time of the eclipse on the 8th of April. So Chiron is back in the same place, and it's sextiling this Jupiter. Chiron in Aries. So Chiron sextiling Jupiter also calls in this notion of what do I believe? What is my religious or spiritual belief? And certainly this is part of the dynamic I think we need to really reflect on in these times, because as Diwali invites us to understand, we really want to understand what it means to be victorious over evil, what the good over evil and the light over the darkness represents. Where when we do understand the meaning of who we are, the truth of who we are, and the truth of our interconnected nature, the fabric of life itself, we recognize how foolish it is to want to harm each other, want to steal from each other, want to possess, want to fight and struggle with others. That's also the Mars opposite Pluto can be power struggles and pushing and pulling in different contexts in relationship. There's some need when we feel afraid or when we don't trust life. There's a need to control all of these things. And what we forget is that when we've come through life in different stages of our life, most of what happens to us, most of the events that really have enriched our lives have been coming in a way that we hadn't organized, we hadn't planned, we didn't invite that in. We just simply realized this is an opportunity that I can grow into, or this is a relationship that I want to grow into, and so on. So these are things that are always happening to us, but yet somehow we feel this compulsion to control everything, wrestle it to the ground, and really try and make something happen, when in fact life is trying to offer us this opportunity at every turn. Saturn is in a really interesting trine. It's 4 degrees of trine, or 3.5 degrees of a trine from this 9-degree Scorpio new moon. And Saturn is backing up in retrograde now at 12 degrees and 51 minutes of Pisces. And Saturn is also very slow at the moment. So Saturn is really, really, really inching its way through. It's going to be in stationing direct, not far from this degree, only half a degree away from this point, in the middle of November. So on the 15th of November, Saturn will station, and it will hold that degree point for quite some time. So we're looking at the same degree point with Saturn for many weeks, actually, much like with Mars going very, very slowly, Saturn is going very, very slowly, and Saturn is retrograding in Pisces, which Jupiter rules. So Jupiter is the ruler of both Sagittarius and Pisces. And here we have a Jupiter retrograde, Saturn retrograde, with this theme of what it is that we believe or what we have faith in. And especially with this notion of scorpionic needing to control and not trusting life, we really can develop a pattern of trust. We can really use this Saturn in Pisces moment, because it's going to be there now through till June. We can use this Saturn in Pisces moment where we develop a trust in life. We recognize what it is that we have faith in, what we can rely upon in our spiritual practice, in our spiritual life, and make that mean something. So Saturn in Pisces is where there is doubt. There can be doubt, and there can be this operation of a feeling of not being sure who is the authority, or who is it that I can rely upon. But when we start to become clear that it's coming from the inside out, it's coming through us, we don't need to worry about controlling the outer world. We don't need to control other people. When we control other people, whether it be at the end of a weapon, or if it's through our emotional manipulation, again, these are the scorpionic themes, we're living in fear. And this is why Scorpio relates to fear. And the motivation of Scorpio is to overcome that. That fear is the baser energy of Scorpio, and the fearlessness and overcoming is the let's say higher, but without a sense of a hierarchy, manifestation of Scorpios. Let's say the more profound or the more enlightened manifestation of Scorpio. So we do get this opportunity right now. If you do like to do things that are, let's say, meditative or ceremonial, ritualistic, this is a brilliant time to do that. You can do that already from, say, the 30th of October right through till the 2nd or 3rd of November. And of course, the emphasis on the 1st. But if you're setting intentions, I always suggest that you in the more traditional way, that you set your intentions, but you don't necessarily take action on anything until after you see that little crescent moon in the sky. So you want to have the appearance of the moon, wait for the moon to move. In this case, it would be moving into the end of Sagittarius and into Capricorn before you start to take action. And again, that depends on what your motivation, what the plan is, or what your motivation is, what your intention is. But it's the tradition suggests that you don't start taking action under a dark sky. That's for things that are intimate and for you to internalize. So what have I forgotten here? I think I've spoken about everything except the nodal axis. The nodal axis is conspicuous by its lack of influence at this point. It's not that it's not influential, but that it's not aspecting things here. Mars is ruling the North Node. It has been since July of 2023. So Mars is continuing to rule that North Node from a place of lacking dignity. It's in its fall in Cancer because it's in its exaltation in Capricorn, and that's why Mars is considered to be a little bit of a wild card in Cancer. It can mean that emotions can be repressed or they can be suppressed, or our motivations also can be waxing and waning, just like the moon that rules Cancer. And so what we have here is a North Node that is also a little bit without a guide, without a sense of what to do next. Also, because Chiron is not only sextiling Jupiter, but also trining Venus, there may be some aspect, again, of relationship or belief or faith or feeling of what to do. Venus in opposition to Jupiter can be a little bit excessive, especially as Venus herself is in Jupiter-ruled sign, is in Sagittarius. And so as she develops, as she moves forward in the couple of days following the lunation, she will perfect that opposition. And there may be some things that we really jump into with a little bit too much enthusiasm without recognizing the deeper potential, or perhaps without recognizing where we were looking only on the surface of something, and jumped in a bit too soon. I see this moment in time, but, collectively, but also at the time of this new moon, and always with Scorpio moons, it always feels like this, that we really owe it to ourselves to try to understand ourselves and to really develop this trust in life. This one of my favorite expressions is an Arab expression, which is to trust in God and tie up your camel. And the way I see that is that you really give everything to God. We give everything to the universe, whatever you want to call that, spirit, creation, or whatever you want to call it. The force of energy that makes flowers grow, that makes our hearts beat. And that energy is always moving through us and is always creating. And here, in this case, if we're putting all of that trust in human beings, we're always going to be disappointed. Whereas if we trust in life itself, we trust the universe, and we trust in this kind of quantum soup that we're all swimming in, then we don't worry about whether we need to trust another person, because the inner knowing, which is also scorpionic, that intuition, Scorpio moon is deeply intuitive, deeply even psychic in some cases. It will already give you the message that you can trust or not. But if you're putting your trust in somebody else and you're expecting an outcome, if that's in that more manipulative or sort of quid pro quo way of relating to somebody, you will always be sorely, sorely disappointed. So reflect on that a little bit at the time of this new moon, and of course at any time. And it's a kind of a life thing to, a life skill to develop. But I think at this particular juncture, we really need to be very deep. We need to look at these questions of life and death. How am I relating to life itself? And take it away from the individual. Notice where there might be some kind of issues around jealousy or possessions and wanting to hold on to things, wanting to control, power struggles, because of course that when with Mars ruling this lunation and then Pluto being the modern ruler, I don't tend to work with the modern rulers, but it's many of you do, so it's certainly significant that they're in opposition at the time of this new moon. And so we're looking at something that requires a lot of maturity, a lot of depth of understanding. We are all family. This is the Mars in Cancer opposite Pluto. It's almost pointing out that this tension is inherent as long as we don't really know how to be connected to one another globally, not just in the intimacy of our own home and our relations, if we're only thinking about people who belong to our family or our country or our religion and everyone else as being somehow faulty or evil or worse, we're missing out on what the truth of life is. So this is the opportunity. This is, I think, the offering of this moment. And certainly this is a beautiful opportunity if we look at the Mercury trining Neptune to create something new, that we're creating a new vision for what we want to see. And we can add action, which is, of course, Mars as well. It's not always about war. It's not always about aggression, but it's simply what action, what motivation, what aims do I have in this moment? We can take that action and use it really consciously. So Mars opposite Pluto can be taking action towards our personal transformation in the recognition of what it is that we need to transform in ourselves. So not waiting for everybody around us to transform. This is, I think, the only way out of this quagmire that we're finding ourselves in. So let's look at this sign by sign. I'm going to just back up the chart until we get to Aries, or perhaps maybe I'll go forward to get to Aries. Let's do it that way. Is that a good idea? I think I don't have a choice. I'll have to go forward to Aries. Sorry, hang on just a moment, folks. I'm gonna go hour by hour. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a moment here. I need a nap. All right, let's get ourselves to, oh, we're going the wrong way. Yes, hello. We're going to go towards Aries, and then we're going to start one sign at a time. And here we're looking at Sun, ascendant, as well as the moon sign. And the reason that we can do that, and I must make a video about this as well, because I keep getting this question, is because we use derived houses. So that means the ascendant is one place on the chart that is very obviously where we can start the chart, in this case with Aries on the ascendant. But when we look at something from the sun or from the moon, it's going to be counting the number of houses from that sun or from that moon. For example, if you have an Aries sun, I'm going to count 8 houses to get to the Scorpio new moon. And that's how we do that. So these are called derived houses or derivative houses. And that's how solar astrology is done. You can read an entire natal chart just knowing the person's sun. And that's those houses. Understanding those houses is how we do these readings. And that's why they actually do make sense for people, even if it doesn't always make sense for you, because these are not personal readings. These are general readings. So, by the way, I am doing the 2025 readings at the moment. I'm recording them all this week or before the Scorpio new moon, and I'll tell you more about that. And you can, in this case, I'm asking for an offering for these readings because I don't monetize my channel. And so I'm going to be selling the readings at €9 each or 108 euros for the all 12 signs. So if you would like to know what's going on in advance of 2025, for your rising sign. They're about an hour each, and I will happily send you the link to that after the 1st of November. So anyway, for Aries, sun, moon, or rising sign, or ascendant sign if you prefer, this is significant because you are ruled by Mars as well. So Scorpio and Aries are both ruled by Mars. Mars is in your 4th house. A pesky place for Mars. It's not very comfortable. Not only is it squaring your sign, but it's also in a place where there's a lot of agitation around home and family, perhaps even some difficulties around the physical home, maybe some challenges that require your attention. This can be around work and needing to do work on the house, for example, needing to do repairs or things going on in the house. Or there can be some tension around your work-life balance. I hate using that expression, but meaning that what you do indoors and what you do out in the world, or how you are in your intimate life and what you are in your public life, is somehow in a place of tension. And this seems to be coming from what you want most intimately, or what you're really hoping for in terms of your deepest desire. That's the 8th house where we find this new moon in Scorpio. And so we get this situation here where you end up with a building frustration or perhaps an awareness of what it is that's holding you back. There may be something involving a spouse. Perhaps it's a frustration around income and how you share your income. We also have Uranus in the second house. It's been there since the spring of 2018, or let's say April, May 2018, and it's in opposition to Mercury, which is also in the eighth. So there's something here going on that requires you addressing whatever this issue is in the eighth house of intimacy. And this can also be where we find secrets and things that are not in our awareness, but that require some revelation. They require some knowing. Now we have Saturn in a trine to that eighth house from the 12th house. So there's another aspect of what might be hidden from awareness, or it can also be something to do with people at a distance, things that are at a distance, or work that's at a distance, because Saturn rules your 10th house of your career and your 11th house of your socializing. And it can be that there's something there that requires a little adjustment when the moon is in a trine, or the sun and moon together are in a trine to Saturn. Whatever you're revealing now or whatever you're dealing with right now can have a long-lasting consequence. It can be helpful. It's a trine in the end, so that can be quite constructive, even if it feels a little bit challenging in the process. It can be something that gets worked through to make a lasting decision, a lasting choice. If this has something to do with moving, that would be, your ruler in the fourth house, Saturn in the 12th house, Venus in the ninth house. There may be something about moving, maybe something about I need to go away, I want to go abroad, or maybe there are aspects of your life through your life philosophy, or the way that you're looking at life that is also waking you up. Again, Venus has been broadly squaring Saturn. And there's this trine again between Saturn and the new moon, as well as between Neptune, Mars, and Mercury. So there's a lot of reflection on things that are not really obvious to most people. These are the fourth, eighth, and 12th houses that are very deeply psychological. They're very hidden from most people's view. And they're things that are intimate to our lives and that are yet important, really sort of foundational to our lives, especially understanding the way that we operate in the outer world depends on how we're feeling, of course, how we're seeing our life. So all of this is quite transformational, but it may be that people around you don't necessarily, unless they're living with you at home, and you're being a bit of a grouch in the fourth house there at home, they may not notice that you're going through quite a lot at this time. And so the way through that would be to talk about it. Mercury is there to talk about it. And when Mercury goes into the ninth house, it will be feeling a little bit more capable, let's say, or able to put a positive spin on things and to talk about what needs to be said. There may be a revelation or a surprise within marriage, or a surprise within some kind of financial dealings. That can also be a part of the story. You do have the South Node going through the seventh house, Venus up in the ninth, in opposition to Jupiter, and of course that the Mercury opposite Uranus. So there may be something to do with revelations around intimacy, revelations around what you share with another person that is bringing some surprise, some news. It depends on your natal chart whether that works for you or not. It doesn't have to be a bad surprise, but it's not something that you would have expected necessarily. And the surprise may have already emerged before the actual moon itself, because Mercury was in direct opposition to Uranus a couple of days before. So this may have already been something that you are realizing, and now the new moon is the impulse to make something new out of that. So that bigger tension between Mars and Pluto is moving on, because Mars is moving into the fifth house on the 4th of November, and Pluto is moving into your 11th house on the 19th of November. But the broad tension still remains. So there is something here that you need to check in on in terms of, what am I frustrated about with regards to home, family, my lineage, perhaps land, perhaps property, things like that, and what I'm doing out in the world, or how I'm showing up socially, and does that need to change? Again, the 10th house can also be marital status, so that these things may need to change. So I'll leave it at that, Aries, and I will see you in the next video. Taurus, this is happening in the axis of self and relationship. So you've got a new moon in your house of relationship. And that's quite significant because you are definitely pulling in something that is important to you personally, a new awareness in relationships, a new understanding of what you might need in relationships, a new sort of kickstart in relationship. This can also be about business partners because the seventh house is a business house as well. And Mars is in the house of commerce, and Mars is ruling that from the third house. It's also a local space issue, and it also represents siblings. We have Saturn in the house of elder siblings, along with Neptune, and we have Mars in the third house of siblings, cousins, extended family in general, but especially younger siblings. And there may be some issue that comes up that's actually to do with a sibling because the Mars is trining Mercury, which represents siblings, and cousins, and uncles, and all those people. So there may be something that you're having to grapple with that is specific to your family, specific to your extended family or your local space, your neighborhood, be where you live, the place that you live. Friends as well are Mercury and third house, as well as the 11th house. So your relationships of all kinds, kind of day-to-day relationships, seem to be part of this bigger story. I would have to see your natal chart to know exactly what the details are with all of that. But it seems that this is a very big moment for Taurus to understand something. There's something changing in the area of relationships that might be changing your sense of self now that Mars is also in a sextile to Uranus, which is in your first house of self, in opposition to the um, potential sibling, friend, or at the very least communication aspect of Mercury. Of course, Mars in the third house is about communications too, how you speak, how you refer to people, how you communicate in general, whether it be through body language or through speech or through internet or whatever. So be mindful of that. There may potentially be some grumpiness, especially Mercury in Scorpio, and then on top of that, Mars in the third house can have you say things that you might have to backtrack later, you might regret. That may be in terms of online stuff, or it may be in terms of siblings, or maybe again in terms of something to do with an extended family issue. Venus is in your eighth house, which is quite favorable. She's bringing you some kind of good fortune in terms of how you connect intimately. So maybe whatever is going on is not necessarily an issue between you and another person, but happening because the other person is going through something that you're having to grapple with. It may be something you need to really step into. Of course, Pluto is in opposition to that Mars. Pluto is up in your ninth house with Mars in the third house. And so this is really pulling in a sense of what you believe, how you communicate that, what do you have faith in. Choices. Also, the third house is about willpower and your choices and your sense of what drives you in this moment. Equally, we have Saturn and Neptune up in the 11th house of your vision for the future. So there may be something that feels frustrated or stuck at this time. That, by the way, will change quite dramatically in January as the nodes shift, and then through 2025. We'll talk a lot about that in the 2025 readings, and I'll put more information up later on this week before the new moon. So if you'd like to buy those, you can. So Jupiter in your second house is quite favorable, but Jupiter is not in great dignity. It's actually ruling that Venus in the eighth house of other people's belongings or money or support. So there may be something helpful, but at the same time, Jupiter, when it's not in great dignity, might have you spending a lot of money. And Chiron is sextiling that, where the North Node is also in the 12th house in Aries. And that's the house of loss. And there can be something here about money potentially, because we do have that Mars in the third, also not in great dignity. So be careful about investments. Be careful about, like, don't lend money to friends at this point, Taurus. Or if you do, lend as much as you're willing to let go of, because it may not work out so much. So Jupiter in the second can be investments, but here when it's retrograde and not in great dignity, it may be more like sunk costs. sunk costs or a bit of a frustrating enterprise. It doesn't have to be negative. It can be something that's just temporary and that you need to simply renegotiate. But again, with the new moon in the seventh house, ruled by Mars, not in great dignity. In the third house, there may be something going on here. And of course, with the opposition to Pluto, there may be something going on here that you are finding testy, not super easy right now. So don't maybe hold back if there's something financial, and hold back for a little bit until perhaps until Mercury moves into the eighth house as well. Mercury will be retrograding in Sagittarius. We'll talk about that another time, but it's not yet. So, so take advantage of the couple of days after this new moon. And anyway, it's happening on Friday, so you've got the weekend. Maybe then jump in on a Monday. Except that that's the exact day, the Monday, Tuesday is when we have the Mars opposite Pluto. So I leave it up to you. I would need to see your natal chart before I would know for sure. So good luck with all that, Taurus. I'll see you in the next video. So Gemini, Sun, Moon, and Rising signs or ascendant sign. This is happening in your sixth house. So Scorpio, in your sixth house, it's a house of challenge. It's a house of needing to overcome. And so there can be something here that you're recognizing needs to be dealt with in the everyday realm. So there's something that you're perhaps reacting to financially. There's maybe we've got Mars in the second house ruling the lunation in opposition to Pluto. So there may be some issue of financial loss or financial, can also be a gain or something that you're needing to negotiate potentially, because Jupiter is in your first house, but retrograding. So there's something that probably requires a little bit of reflection or renegotiation, especially since the last 3 months, since it was squaring Saturn. And when it squares Saturn the next time, Saturn will be direct and Jupiter will still be retrograde, and that's 24, 25 December. So you're very personally affected by this, and it's affecting you in your career or your social standing or your reputation. Venus is in your seventh house of relationships, so that's very helpful, very constructive. But it can have you being a wee bit maybe over-optimistic. It's very favorable anyway for connecting with people or giving, just the give and take of relationships. But as Mars is in a trine to Mercury from the sixth, again, there may be some frustration. It could be to do with colleagues, could be to do with people you employ. Mercury is your ruler, not generally happy, ruled by Mars. So when Mercury is in Scorpio, especially when it's opposing Uranus, there's some kind of adjustment or a shock or a surprise element that's there coming from, in case of Uranus, the house of hidden enemies, which may be yourself, by the way. The hidden enemy might be yourself undoing the thing that you're doing that you know you shouldn't be, or the thing that you shouldn't be, that you aren't doing that you know you should be. So that Mercury is a bit of a frustration at the moment, because it'll be a little bit easier for you as Mercury goes into your seventh house along with Venus, even though then Mercury loses dignity, in fact, when it goes into Sagittarius. So I think if there is some kind of challenge, some kind of difficulty, you want to be very philosophical about whatever's going on here, Gemini. There may be something that's happening in the eighth house of what you receive through marriage or what you might receive through inheritance, patterns of receiving money or support or understanding things from an intimate place, emotional intimacy, where Mars is in the second house, influencing your values. That's got something to do with friends or your vision for your future. It's ruling your 11th, ruling your sixth house of everyday work. So perhaps you're thinking about income, how you share money or how you earn money. Certainly that's where the North Node has brought your attention for a long time, since July of 2023. So this could also be something that you're dealing with on a financial level, but it can also be your personal value, what you value or how you see your value and what you need to do about that. So this is a really good new moon to clear up issues that might be challenging to you. The sixth house is obstacles and things that are difficult and contracts and things like that. Certainly try and resolve anything. If there is anything, try and resolve it before Mars goes into the third house, or at least know that when Mars goes into the third house, it's going to retrograde. And that is the house of contracts and agreements. So just assume that something's going to change and you're not quite going to be ready to make the big plunge. Maybe it's a new job, or there's some issue around financing or your income with regards to a new job. Or do I change jobs because I don't know about what the income is going to be like, for example. All right, so many possibilities. Without seeing your natal chart, I really don't know. I sound like a Gemini, don't I? So, so many options, but none conclusive. So, there you are, Gemini. I'll see you in the next video. Alrighty, and so here we have Cancer. Cancer, sun, moon, or ascendant sign. And Mars is in your first house, Cancer, ruling your fifth house, which represents children. It represents the love and lovers, romance, creativity, your impulse for something that makes you feel alive, makes you feel self-expressed, can be about commerce or your entrepreneurial, let's say, space. If you are working for yourself, particularly, a lot of Cancers do, because they do have Aries on the 10th house, also ruled by that Mars. So what action you take right now affects the fifth house of your entrepreneurial spirit and the 10th house of your career. In my case, for example, as a Cancer moon and ascendant, which, by the way, is being affected directly by this Mars and Pluto opposition, I am offering the 2025 readings, and that will be as of this new moon. So I will put up an announcement about that if you'd like to buy one or all 12 of them. And I'm offering them for about €9 each, and they are about 1 hour long. So I hope you can support me this way, because I don't actually monetize this channel. So it's one of my ways of earning a bit of income doing the work that I love to do. So we do have this Mars in your first house, Cancer, that is trining Mercury in the fifth, which also may represent something to do with children, a new motivation in the lives of your children. The new moon is in the house of children as well. And again, if you don't have your own children, this may be about procreating. It's going to be about wanting children. Next June, you're going to have Jupiter in your first house. It can be very classically when people become pregnant and have children. And Jupiter was transiting my first house when I had my second child. And it was transiting my 10th house when I had my first child. So this is one way that can look. If you would like to have a baby, if you're looking to grow your family, this is a great time to do that. Again, it depends on your natal chart, but there's something going on in the lives of your children, if you do have children, or in the lives of your projects, if your projects are more like your babies and your creative output. And that might have something to do with your income as well, because Uranus is in that second house to the 10th. Again, that's a derived house. Second from the 10th is the 11th house, which is gains, money that you earn from things that you do, money that you earn from people in supportive places. And with Uranus there has been quite a lot of change around that area of your life, and especially quite dramatically since 2018. May 2018. But also that was where you had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in on the 20th of April 2024, and 3 or 4 days later, 24th of April, was the full moon in Scorpio. And so that was at 24 degrees, which is roughly where we find Uranus today. So there's something here that might be hearkening back to April, that you're able to understand and maybe develop in terms of whether it be your children, or again, these projects that you're working on, or perhaps a romance that might have something to do with fifth house stuff, where Pluto in the seventh house might be uh, tweaking something in terms of relationships because it's been in your house of relationship for 16 years and it's now for the very last time moving out of your seventh house into your eighth house. But as it goes, it's leaving with an opposition to Mars, and that Mars opposition may mean that you need to stand up for something. If this is about a relational issue, it doesn't have to mean conflict. It means self-assertion as well. For some people, that has to be that. For other people, it can mean conflict, and you need to tone it down a wee bit. Again, that depends on your natal chart. It depends on your natal Mars and how that might affect all of that. So there's going to be some stimulus, let's say, one way or another, that can actually be quite helpful, except that with the Neptune in trine to that from the ninth house, there may be some lack of clarity or a feeling of things not entirely being clear in terms of your motivations. It's a trine, and that can be favorable or not. Trines are not always necessarily good fortune. It can also mean that they're not taken seriously enough because there's a flow. And so we might let things go, especially water signs. There's a tendency to let things go until you realize that you're actually really not happy with the situation. And then things explode. And that's the problem with the Mars in Cancer. There can be a reactive quality with Mars in Cancer where the no didn't come early enough. And that's where maybe you'll benefit from the Mars opposite Pluto. What else have we got here? Yeah, Venus is in your sixth house of everyday work, so that's quite helpful. Um, she's opposing Jupiter, who is indeed in the house of loss, also the house of one's self-undoing, and Jupiter rules your sixth house. So beware of self-indulgence. Jupiter opposing Venus, that can be being overly indulgent. And the fifth house also has a quality of indulgence, especially when the moon is in the fifth house. There can be a kind of indulgent quality there. Um, and Jupiter is retrograde and not in great dignity, where Mars itself is ruling Mercury, which rules that Jupiter. So then Mercury moves into your sixth house, which is helpful, except that it also will not be in good dignity. It will be in detriment when it does that. It's going to be in the sign opposite from the sign it rules, but that puts it into a sign-based mutual reception. So we're talking 2 or 3 days later after the moon. So it might be that there's something that is revealed to you that you need to deal with, perhaps business-wise or perhaps with your kids. And then by the time Mercury moves into the sixth, there's a little bit of a feeling of, okay, something's shifted. I get it now. And of course, that Mars from the first house is ruling your North Node. And the North Node doesn't fully participate in this moon. It's actually getting a bit of a breather in this lunation. It's not really aspecting anything. Or at least not strongly so. And so, so this is something that you can also, is it getting a semi-square? Sesqui, no, it's not even. No, it's never mind. It's not. Just leave it at that. Um, so this is not really a part of this eclipse, except that Mars, which is ruling that North Node, is all about what you're doing at this time, and it's reflecting what it is in the fifth house that's expressing something that you love and how you're being creative about that. So make the most of this, Cancer, and I will see you. And of course, you are ruled by the moon, so the lunations always matter to Cancer. So I will see you in the next video and come up with some more information about that Pluto opposite Mars, or Mars opposing Pluto. All right, thanks for watching. And Leo, this is happening in your fourth house of family and home and your lineage. What it is that you feel you get security from, what makes you feel stable. When there's a new moon there, you might even have a sense that you want to reestablish a home territory or a home base. You're ruled by the sun, and of course the sun is there. So anyway, always at this time of the year in Scorpio season, there's something going on at home. It's a very intimate part of your chart. It can be your personal home, your innards, and your feeling of psychological or emotional security, or it can be the physical home, your actual property, the land you own, the house that you live in, or real estate in any description. So there's something going on here that's creating a new impulse, a new cycle. Saturn is in your eighth house of other people's money, and it is broadly trining this new moon. And as a result, there may be some restriction in terms of other people's money, or there's something that's coming through that may be a wee bit delayed with Saturn retrograding, but it's not a big obstacle. It's a delay. There's something that needs to shift. With Pluto still in the sixth house of obstacles and challenges and contracts and things like that in opposition or being opposed by Mars in the 12th house, there may be something really annoying or pesky that's going on that is with reference to the family or uh, your own sense of what you should have done, what you regret doing, or what you need to do that you didn't do yet. It's never too late, so get the thing done, whatever that is. Mars is trining Mercury, and it's ruling that Mercury at the same time, and they're both in a trine to Neptune. So there's something that you may not have understood clearly that might end up causing you a little bit of a headache around family, around home, around property issues, or even just around your frame of mind, your emotional or mental state at this point. And maybe you're recognizing now where you want to make some changes for your own benefit. When Saturn moves through the eighth house, it can feel like a lonely time. It can feel like an unsupported time. And it's really designed to get you to stand on your own 2 feet. So Leo, sun, moon, or rising is not always what the books say. Often Leo has to learn how to be independent, how to be confident, how to be outgoing, and so on. And especially for Leo rising, it's not always a given. And so there's something here maybe you're able to learn from. And that Mars can be quite helpful to you when it moves into the first house, because then it will be not only out of the 12th house, where it's a little bit pesky because you're not seeing things super clearly, but it's also moving into better dignity. Mars likes being in Leo, and especially in your first house. Mars also rules your ninth house of what you have faith in, what you believe, what you find is important, what is your guiding philosophy, and that's where the North Node is. So Mars is going to be trining that when it moves into your first house, and that's going to give you a bit more of a perspective and maybe a better sense of what it is that you want to take action on, growing into this new perspective of your life or this new vision for your life. Jupiter's also in the 11th, helping you create a new vision for your life. It's with an opposition to Venus, which is in the fifth house of your creative expression, potentially children as well, issues around perhaps love as well, love relationships. If with Saturn in the eighth, there may have been some tension around that or some feeling of distance or absence in that sense. But Jupiter opposing Venus can be quite constructive, except that Jupiter is retrograde. So even here, there may be a feeling, and it's in poor dignity. So there may be a feeling that you're just not quite gelling with friends or with a new group or association, or you're not really believing the same things anymore. You used to be, let's say, you used to belong to the same meditation group or the same political group or whatever, and now it's like, I don't know who these people are. I don't relate to any of this any longer. Or you recognize that you're changing a lot. It's not about them, it's about what you want, and that's changing a lot. And I think you'll find that when Jupiter is stationing direct, which you'll get in February, that becomes clearer to you. So don't despair. Saturn will be stationing direct on the 15th already of November, and that will also be very clarifying for you. So an intense time between the 6th house and 12th house axis because of that Mars-Pluto opposition for you, Leo. And that can have something to do with where you realize that your everyday life really does need to change if you want to find inner peace or a feeling of stability. So this would be the opportunity, maybe one last push, because all of the other oppositions are going to be in the house of self and other. So there may be the realization is now I need to change all of this so that I could be well. And then what happens is you realize how much you need to stand up for something in the face of a relationship to get where you want to go with that. And that gels a lot with the Uranus in the 10th house, especially in opposition to Mercury. As Uranus has been changing your ambitions and your sense of what you want to do out in the world, what you feel your vocation is, what your overall sense of your vision or your reputation for how you engage socially. I don't mean socially in a friendly way. I mean out in society, out in the world, what you do out in the world. It's changing in a big way. Right. I think I've covered it all. So good luck with all of this, Leo. Make the most of this new moon in the fourth house, where you really can dig deep into your psyche, especially with Saturn and Mars. Go deep into perhaps ancestral family issues, unconscious family trauma or conscious family trauma, where you realize it's time for a new reset for yourself so you can find peace. Good luck with all of that, Leo. I'll see you in the next video. So Virgo, we have this happening in your third house, which is the house of the mind. The moon is very happy in the house of the mind because that's where it's considered in its joy. Because the mind is always fluctuating and changing, and so is the moon. It's about how we think, how we interpret things mentally, and through our awareness, through the everyday awareness. Um, our opinions and so on are in the third house. And maybe you're finding that there's a new motivation. So Mars has been in your 11th house of your vision for the future, social groups as well, how you show up in terms of how you connect with people out in social groups or issues that are shared interest. And Mars maybe has brought a lot of dynamism there, or potentially even tension in these groups. And maybe you're realizing that now and you need to scale that back. Mars in the 11th house um, can make people a wee bit of a bossy cow, or can cause some challenges around connection, because there's a desire to control and manipulate the situation. But Mars also in the 11th can also represent some issue around income, money that you earn. And we do have Pluto in the fifth house in opposition. So maybe this is something about what you're doing in a way, how you're expressing yourself through what you do creatively or as an entrepreneur. We've got Saturn in the seventh. And that also is with a reference to business, working in business. Third house is a commerce house. Mercury itself is there, along with the new moon in a commerce house. So maybe you're reflecting on different ways that you can do business. Venus is in the fourth house of home. Perhaps you would benefit from working from home, or doing something that allows you to be more flexible, to be at home. Jupiter is opposing Venus, and it's giving a new sense, a new vision for what it is you want to do out in the world, and how people see you is changing as well. Jupiter brings a lot of visibility when it's in the 10th house. You become noticed. So there's something about the way that you're speaking that is going to be important to how people notice you. Now, Mercury is trining Mars. It's building up to a trine at the time of the new moon, and it's finishing a trine with Neptune. So this is a groundwater trine, Neptune in the seventh as well, where there may have been a feeling of disappointment in terms of relationships or in terms of business partnerships. And that's somehow finding a resolution here as well, because now we've got this Pluto-Mars opposition, Mars in a trine to Mercury, and it's showing you something that you need to know about how to correspond, or how to communicate around these issues, these things that are changing. This could be, the third house can relate to siblings, of course, as well. The planet Mercury also represents siblings. And so this can be third house, generally speaking, the broader family, neighborhood, the people you connect with on a regular basis, if not daily, in your neighborhood, for example. And also where Mars is, which is ruling the third house, Mars is in the house of elder siblings. And generally speaking, Mars would be the brother. Venus would be the sister. And classically, we've got Venus at home. So there may be something here also to do with siblings, potentially a brother that is changing direction or changing some aspect of how you're relating. So it's a new start. It doesn't necessarily mean bad, by the way. It's just that there's something new going on here in that dynamic. Mercury is in opposition to Uranus, where Uranus has been going through your ninth house. So there may be, again, this big questioning around what I believe, what I have faith in, what I know to be my sort of mission or my purpose, my sense of what my role is. The first, fifth, and ninth houses are the Dharma houses, the houses of how we act and how we do things based on who we are. how we show up in the world and how we do the thing that we have to do here. And so Pluto has been challenging in the fifth house, changing that sense of who am I? How do I show up for quite some time, 16 years. And then Uranus doing the same thing in terms of what you've conceived to be your purpose. And so since 2018, Uranus has been shaking that up. And then with Pluto, it's been since 2008. And now it's kind of coming to a head. This new moon, you have an opportunity to really dig in and question some of those things just before Pluto moves into your sixth house and changes your everyday world, your everyday living, your everyday schedule, your work world, your sense of duties and obligation. Then Mars and Pluto will continue to oppose from the 6th to the 12th, which are the healing axis. But you also want to be aware that it's also the axis of the victim and martyr. And we do have Saturn in your seventh house, and that is part of the theme also of the Virgo and Pisces axis. So any areas of life where you're not acting, not taking action, not taking responsibility will make you feel that you're somehow a victim of your own life, but that's not true. It's because you're not taking action. So if something's not working, things are not working out in your life the way you want, the solution is simply to take action. And that's all that's lacking. Problems are simply things that haven't been taken seriously, or things that haven't been acted upon, let's say. The action can also mean a change of mind, which is where we see this moon again and Mercury. So I need to see your chart to know more about that, but just some ideas that might be influencing you at this time, Virgo, Sun, Moon, and rising sign. So I'll see you in the next video. So Libra, this is happening in your second house of money and family, your values and what you consider to be of value. And Mars is in the 10th house, and that also represents parents, and it represents authority figures and your work, or vocation, if you like, or your career. So there's a lot going on here that might have something to do with income, because Mars then moves into your 11th house of gains, as Pluto itself moves into your fifth house of how you show up and how you engage in the world. Saturn is in your sixth house of your work or everyday life, your everyday schedule, your health, illness, and can be strongly influencing you there in terms of where you're feeling frustrated or held back at this time. Certainly, relationships have been a very big part of your story for the last year plus, because since July 2023, you've had the South Node in your first house with the North Node in the seventh. So there's something that you've had to surrender about the quality of engagement in relationships. And now maybe you're reflecting on how this is reflected in your values that affects your social status, because we've got Mars up there in the 10th. It's trining by sign, at least, it's trining this lunation, certainly trining Mercury, which is in the third house along with the lunation. And of course, Mars rules your seventh house of relationships. Venus, your ruler, is in the third house, and she's ruled by Jupiter in your ninth. So there may be something here about choosing, about needing to speak up. Third house is about communication. We've got that influence already between Mars trining Mercury and Mercury itself trining Neptune. Maybe there's something you're realizing with Neptune in the sixth house. Often we just give way too much, especially as Saturn is there in the sixth. So maybe just the feeling of I am close to burnout and I can't do this any longer. And whatever is going on, Venus in the third house makes it easier to speak up about that. When Mercury gets in there, that will also be easier. That will be just a couple of days after the lunation. And so definitely this is an opportunity for you to speak up for yourself. So do take that on board and reflect on what might need to change in your work or your everyday experience. How do you show up for other people? Pluto has completely changed your relationship to your lineage, to your family, to your feeling of security, psychologically as well. And while we have Pluto in a broad trine, well, it's still trining Uranus. It's not exact until next year. It's also Uranus is being opposed by Mercury, so that Mercury opposition to Uranus can be sudden understanding, sudden insight, sudden awareness around things that have to do with marriage or money, shared resources, intimacy. That's ruled by Venus. The eighth house is ruled by Venus. You're also, of course, ruled by Venus. And Venus is there in the third house that has something to do with exchanges of all kinds, neighbors, extended family, how you express yourself. So there's something that you're realizing here, perhaps based on finances, perhaps based on values, that needs to change your everyday experience. With that Mars coming back into your 10th house, so it's leaving your 10th house on the 4th of November, and it's coming back into the 10th house on the 6th of January. So it's kind of 2 months going to be hovering just inside the 11th house of your vision for your future, social groups, and so on. So this is an opportunity for you to really reflect as you're redesigning something about how you show up in the world. So good luck with all of that, Libra. I'll see you in the next video. And Scorpio, of course, this is your new moon. You had a full moon in Scorpio on the 24th of April, and now this is your new moon. This is the end of that cycle and the beginning of another one. So you're moving into a new phase for yourself. It's certainly an awareness of something that you might want to move into in a different way, because now we've got quite a lot of impulses for big change with the Mars, your ruler, in the 9th house, having been there since the beginning of September, I think since the 3rd or 4th of September, and in opposition to Pluto one last time. So there's some issue here around what you feel is right. Maybe it's around standing up for something, standing up for an idea, standing up for the truth. This is very strong with Pluto in the 3rd house. There's a really strong motivation for change, really strong motivation for change around business partnerships. We've got Saturn in the 5th, which is also squaring Venus in the house of money for you, and broadly trining that moon as well. And also we've got Uranus in your 7th house of relationships that can be both personal relationships and marriage partners, but also business partners. And Jupiter's retrograding in your 8th house of what you gain from relationships, what you share. Something's needing revision in a big way. So I think part of the story will be revealed to you in December 24th, 25th, when Jupiter squares Saturn. But I think already at this moment, you're pretty clear what needs to start. It's like, I am doing something different now. The new moon in your 1st house is saying, I'm setting myself up completely for a new cycle. This is very personal, but it also affects your whole life. So it's you, as you're showing up, recognizing it's time for a new phase. There's a new vision, and that's an annual thing. You do get a new moon every year, and sometimes two. But this is the moment for you. So that 1st of November period is a very strong impetus for you for change. And especially if you have a placement, Scorpio, if you have a placement around 9 degrees, which you could add 2 or 3 degrees on either side of that, so maybe up to 4. The moon moves very quickly. So if you're looking at anything from, like, say, 5 to 4, I don't know, 13 degrees of Scorpio, this is very significant for you anyway. It's happening around the time of either your birthday or around your ascendant or around your moon. So anyway, it's going to be affecting you quite personally, but it doesn't matter because it's happening in your house of self, whether it's the sun, moon, or ascendant sign. There's a quality of that where the sun is about your awareness of self, aware about your sense of your purpose and your life and the awareness or consciousness that you bring to life. And the moon is how you feel about that. It's about all those more inner aspects about your inner motivations, your psychological or emotional motivations, perhaps also with reference to where you live and your mother, for example. And of course, the ascendant, if it's a Scorpio ascendant, it's about your whole life changing. Saturn has been making things a little bit challenging for you since March 2023, as Pluto moved in at the same time into your 4th house. So there may be a feeling of frustration or loneliness or a need to understand yourself from a psychological place, that you're realizing that you're not as happy as you might think you should be, or that other people think you are. And this is an opportunity to really get the lead out and do something about that. We have Mars moving into your 10th house, where it's going to be for until the 6th of January, then again after the 18th of April. And it will be twice in opposition, once in January and once in April, from your 10th to your 4th. But this is the last time that Mars is opposing Pluto from your 9th to your 3rd house. So this is really a lot to do with what you believe in, what you want to see in terms of your vision. Again, probably largely based on what you value. It is your ruler in the 9th. And Mars in the 9th is a bit like a spiritual warrior. So there's something here that you're really fired up about. And it is trining Mercury, so there's a real choice point here. There's something that you're ready to move into, take action on, perhaps also that lends itself to finances, because when soon after this new moon, Mercury moves into your house of money, where Venus already is. And we see also Jupiter in another money house, which is about how you're taking money from others and exchanging money. Saturn is in the 5th house of investing and business, etc., etc. So yeah, I think I've said all. Yeah, we definitely, we also see with the North Node ruled by Mars in your 6th house since July 2023, you've definitely been wanting something new in your everyday life, and this is going to emerge. Just hang in there. It's definitely coming. Chiron has also been showing you where things need to change, perhaps in the physical way, in terms of your own physical healing, or in terms of an attitude to how you feel you need to show up every day. Scorpio, of course, is quite intense, can be, and you might push yourself really hard. Chiron is ruled by that Mars as well. And so maybe you're having a realization there's a different way I could show up every day. So Chiron is retrograding back to the place that it was at the eclipse of the 8th of April, but more especially almost exactly back to the place where it was going direct at the time of your full moon in Scorpio on the 24th. So all of that to say, it's a big opportunity for you to understand yourself better and start a whole new cycle, a whole new vibe, Scorpio. So happy birthday if your sun is there, and I will see you in the next video. Sagittarius, this new moon is happening in your 12th house of either faraway lands or things that are at a distance from you, or things that are hidden from you, including things that you don't really know about yourself. And there may be some revelation or understanding of something new, a new cycle around what might be considered what is not helpful for you. This is the house of self-undoing, the things that we do that we shouldn't, or the things that we don't do that we should. You've got Mercury there in a trine to Mars, which is in your 8th house. So Mars already for the last 2 months has been pulling in quite a lot of understanding around your unconscious processes, around your subconscious, maybe motivations. And certainly the 12th house resonates with that. But it can also be a deeply spiritual placement. The 8th house too is about being fearless. It's about seeing what's there, the mysteries of life, and really trying to get into that. And so since Mars has been there and ruling the 12th from the 8th, you will have had, no doubt, some really interesting experiences of awareness and awakening. Speaking of awakening, also Mercury has been opposing Uranus for the couple of days around this moon, and a couple of days, maybe a day or two after, and let's say a day after. Yeah, 2 days after. Let's get it till the 3rd. And that opposition can also bring deep insights, and it can be an insight into your everyday life, how something needs to change around work, or change around the way that you relate to what you consider to be your duty, things that you have to take care of. And especially as Venus is in your 1st house, ruling that 6th house is something very personal at the moment. She's also ruling your 11th house of the future, how you see that, and also gains. So there's something here that you're choosing that requires some reflection in order to get to this new thing that you're recognizing about this pattern that you might hold, or this behavior that needs to change, or this mindset that needs to change, or an awareness around quite literal ancestral connections. We've got Saturn in the fourth, which is very connected to family, family lineage, and so on, home, family, parents, when you're growing up, circumstances around your childhood. Third and fourth house bring that in. And then to see that the new moon is there with Mars in the eighth house, there may be some real deep meaning for Sagittarians here around loss, around the Day of the Dead, around the recognition of the gift of ancestors and the way that they have brought you to where you are. Maybe also about family who has passed this year or in recent past. And this can, of course, be something to do with migration and immigration. That axis between Sagittarius and Gemini has a lot to do with that migration, immigration, emigration. And so maybe the issue is your family is struggling because of one of the millions of issues going on in the world, and something requires change. You might require change. You might need to move, or you might find that your family is struggling, and that's something that you're learning about at this point now, what to do about that. So Pluto is also just about to leave your family house. The second house is family, everything that supports you, and it's moving into your third house. And opposition to that Mars, or being opposed by that Mars more exactly. And so there's something that you're realizing here also about that push and pull between what supports you and what you need to do on your own. That's certainly been the message for Sagittarius. How do I fend for myself these last 16 years? How did I manage? How can I manage to do these things on my own? Find my inner strength, my own resources. It doesn't mean not being in a partnership. It just means to be to be on your own in a way that feels like you can stand on your own two legs. Your ruler Jupiter is in the house of relationship. And so part of this story with Mercury in the 12th is part of that relational question. And Mercury also rules your career house, your vocation, or your social status, your ambitions, and the 10th house of your reputation. So all of those things are also affected, even with this Mercury in the 12th. You might be starting to become aware of where you might need to step up and recognize patterns of self-victimization or martyring. It's also part of the story of the 6th and 12th house axis, overgiving to the point that you feel that you have to lose something yourself. Uranus in the 6th will have changed your everyday life substantially since May of 2018. And that's part of this story because Uranus is being sextiled by Mars. It's trining Pluto, and of course it's being opposed by Mercury. So you're having new insights, I'd say, in succession, probably around this time. And take them seriously. Take all of these things very seriously because these slower moving planets are going to shift in the early months of 2025 into the middle of 2025. Pluto already in November, 19th of November. So you're in for a really big shift as we're going forward. So try and clear up all of these things that might be hidden fears, hidden motivations, realizations around what might be holding you back. All right, so I'll leave it at that, Sagittarius. I would need to see your natal chart to know more about that. So you might like to see, I'll be doing the 2025 readings, and I'm making those available by the time of this new moon. So you might like to buy that. It'll be €9 each, or 108 for all 12 if you're interested in learning more about this, astrology. But then at least you'll see all the different transits and how they might be affecting you in 2025. So watch this space, Sagittarius, and good luck to you. Capricorn, this is the last hurrah with Mars opposing from your 7th house of relationships, opposing Pluto in your 1st house for one last time. And it's in a sextile to Mercury at this time. So Mercury is sextiling Pluto as Mars trines that Mercury and is trining also um, Neptune. Now, Mars is your exaltation ruler, so it always does very well for you, but it's still not very comfortable in either the seventh house or in Cancer. So there may be some struggle in terms of a business relationship, perhaps a life partner as well. It has some bearing on what you believe is the vision for your future. It can also have a bearing on what you earn, the things that you earn from what you do. The 11th house represents gains. And that's where we have this new moon. And again, of course, Mercury is trining from that 11th house as well. It's in an opposition of Uranus to Uranus in the fifth house. So there's something here also potentially around children, around creative projects or entrepreneurial projects. That is a recognition or an insight that you're having, potentially also around investment. So the fifth house is about investing. Now, Venus is in the 12th, ruling the fifth house at the moment, with Uranus retrograde, Saturn retrograding in the third, which is also about exchanges and commerce. Mercury is about to move into the 12th, so I wonder, it might have something to do with investment or money. So be very cautious, be careful. I mean, generally speaking, Capricorn, especially Sun and Rising, are pretty cautious around money. This applies to the ascendant, to the Sun, and to the Moon in Capricorn. But it's maybe not the right time to jump in to investing. Just wait at least a couple of days after the Moon. And when Mars moves into the eighth house, so you're going to have Mars moving on the 4th of November into your eighth house of other people's money, then Pluto moves into the second house of your income, your property, your not property, but your wealth and your capacity to make money. You might find a bit of a struggle in terms of negotiations if you have to negotiate anything around contracts, or if you have to negotiate something to do with um, inheritance, if there's some issue of death that you're having to grapple with, or that you're having to negotiate in terms of who gets what. Mars also rules your fourth house of home, and so there may be something to do with home in terms of land or property or house, actual house and home, or the family, where there's been anyway a lot of your attention because the North Node has been moving through there for sure since July 2023. You've been putting a lot more of your time and attention on your feelings or your sense of what it is that you want and how you might want to feel in terms of financial security or emotional, psychological security, how you want to feel settled, as opposed to the work that you're doing. So somehow in the last just over a year, you've lost interest in the work that you're doing. It may have started before that, possibly over the last 2.5 years, but you're really at this kind of precipice now where you're really, really testing new ideas. And when Pluto moves out of your first house, if you are in the middle of something, if you are in the middle of some negotiation, things may not work initially as you want them to, but it will be in your best interest long term to change. You have Mars coming back into your seventh house. Pluto will stay in the second house, but Mars will move back into the seventh from the 6th of January until the 18th of April. So this will come back. Whatever is going on right now, from the Mars point of view, will come back for review. And I would need to see your natal chart to know more about that. But certainly with Saturn in the third, it's a time to be serious and cautious. You will be very determined about the choices that you make, about your goals. But Saturn is retrograding until the 15th. So if you have a contract to sign, try not to sign it if you can. And we have Mercury retrograding. So just be very careful around the decisions that you make. Try not to lock yourself into something, and consider that you have more time than you think you might have to negotiate in case there's a need to negotiate a contract. Now, don't rush, because Jupiter is also retrograding in your sixth, opposing Venus that it's ruling in your 12th, which can represent financial loss. It can represent issues of hidden enemies. Your own indulgence, for example, can be self-indulgence or your own stubbornness. We could say even with Saturn in the third. So many things. I would need to see your chart to be able to be more clear. So sorry about that, not to be able to give you more clarity there, but it becomes very personal. So this is a time for you to make a big change in terms of your self-identity vis-a-vis your future, the vision that you have for your life. It's a new start. I'm doing this new thing. It can be around social connections as well, that 11th house where the moon is. And it's like, I'm done. I'm so done here. I'm moving on. I want new friends. I want a new relationship. Mars in the seventh is sort of severing relationships. Um, and I want something new to show up in that area of my life. So yeah, it's all tied into the nodal axis to the extent that the South Node is saying, whatever it is I've been doing in the last 19 years, I'm so done. I'm moving on. So there you are. Time to move on. And generally speaking, Capricorn is pretty good at finding the courage to do those things, moving on. So good luck with all of that, Capricorn. I'll see you in the next video. And Aquarius, you have this lunation in your 10th house of your social standing or your social status and work or career or vocation, depending on how you want to describe it, or whatever you do outside the home. So you don't have to be paid for whatever's going on in the 10th house. It's just how people acknowledge you, how they see you. And this seems to be a new cycle. You're showing up in a different way. Now, there was also in April, 24th of April, a new full moon here. And so that full moon showed you something about what you want in the context of what you were feeling you were ready for in your everyday life. That's also where we had the sun with Uranus and Jupiter at that time. So there was something going on between your internal churnings, let's say, or desires, things that you needed or wanted to find in to stabilize yourself, and what that represented for you out in the world. Now we see a new cycle beginning based on that. So you're pulling that out in the 10th house, pulling that out into the world. You're ready to start something different. And hopefully that's been informed also by these last 6 months of awareness since April. You've also got Saturn, your ruler, in the second house of your earnings or your income or your wealth, whatever supports you. And so that's been a challenge as well. There's been something there that has been maybe lacking, or that you've been working harder towards, maybe feeling not so much support, or feeling you've got to do more heavy lifting for the family. You've got to do more for others, maybe, or having to work hard, or you may have decided to purchase a home or make some bigger investment. And so your money's a bit tight at this moment. That's not a bad thing, because Saturn in the second usually makes you a bit serious around money, or at least it forces you to get serious around money. So there might be a feeling of having to tighten your belt, but you understand why. There's a feeling of, if I do this for now, I can get to that place. And that place, in terms of the rulership of Saturn right now, is where Jupiter is, and that's in the fifth house of doing something that is an expression of who I am, or perhaps it's an investment for the family or for children, or it's an investment towards your education, towards your goals of any kind, anyway. Maybe even investing in your own business, because the fifth house is the house of entrepreneurship. You do have the North Node in the third, which is also related to commerce and business of all kinds. Like, could be an online business or whatever, website based kind of thing. And then with Mars in your sixth house over the last 2 months, since the 3rd, 4th of September, there's been a lot of activity, a lot of dynamism. And now you've come to this place where Mars is opposing Pluto in the 12th. And it's a precipice of change in terms of how you act out in your everyday life, or how you do things, how you engage, let's say, in your everyday life. Any conflicts that you may have had with either yourself in terms of what you are afraid of manifesting, or what you might have been fearing with Pluto in the 12th, that can be a part of that. It's been 16 years, a bit of a slog, let's face it, Aquarius. But Mars is going to agitate, let's say, that Pluto one last time. and challenge you to overcome something so that by the time Pluto moves finally into your first house, you're really ready to change. And that can be based on business partnerships or your marriage or some partnership, some relationship that you're grappling with here. Mars is in a trine to Mercury, and Mercury itself is, of course, trining Neptune. Mars has finished its trine to Neptune. The trines independently of Mercury and Neptune can be very creative, can be very inspired, but also can sometimes miss the point around whatever the Neptune issue is in the house of money or family or your values. And Mercury might be showing you need to revise those values. You might be ready to step up in a new way. That Neptune is retrograding away from the edge of Pisces all of this year, next year, 2025, and into the early part of 2026. This is an ongoing story for you, but Mercury is triggering that. And then Mercury trining Mars separately is about doing something based on what you understand or what you realize, how you need to take action. Mars is ruling the Mercury, so there's some dynamism there, maybe an impulsiveness. There may be something that you are recognizing in terms of career that you need to be more cautious around or more courageous around. Also with Mars in a sextile and Mercury in an opposition to Uranus in the fourth, there may have been some initial agitation around your feelings of security or around what feels stable or what's at home for you. And this is also part of that story. So you're realizing that your ambitions are showing up in a way that is reflecting how you feel at home. So a big deal, I'd say, this new moon for you. It's quite a big deal. It's going to give you a whole new cycle, a whole new vision for how you want to engage out in the world. Venus is ruling your fourth from that 11th house. She also rules your ninth house of your sense of higher purpose or your philosophy of life. So there's something new that you're needing now. There's something new that is coming in. The Venus opposite Jupiter in the fifth can be a bit pesky because it can be a bit self-indulgent, especially when Venus opposes it. And when both of them are in each other's signs, there's a mutual reception that pulls each other in, although not necessarily in the best way. So pay attention to whatever that Pluto message was. Where have you not necessarily been doing the right things by you? And any self-indulgence or any feeling of maybe entitlement is one way of looking at that, or a feeling of I'm not ready to make the work or do the work that I need to do. That will show up for you around the 24th, 25th of December when Jupiter retrogrades will square Saturn direct. Then they will square each other again in June, like the 9th, 10th of June, when Saturn moves into Aries and when Jupiter moves into your sixth house of your everyday work in exalted in Cancer. So there's a couple of points at which you will see the results of what you're getting here. But through the square, it can be like, I thought this would happen, but not quite. It's not a no, it's a not quite. You've got to fix it. You've got to be a bit more restrained or more serious or more self-aware. And that's certainly what Pluto has been showing you all of these years and will show you when it goes into your first house. So good luck with all of that, Aquarius, and I'll see you in the next video. And Pisces, you're in a trine. You're also a water sign, so you're in a favorable trine to this new moon, which is happening in your ninth house in Scorpio, along with Mercury. And Mercury is trining Neptune, which is in your first house. And Mars, which is ruling the lunation, has been in your fifth house. So Mars in Cancer in the fifth house may have had you pondering things around your children or around your family dynamics or around creativity of some kind, your love life, your love nature, love affairs or love relationships may not be panning out the way that you had wanted, especially since the early part of September, where there may be some kind of feeling of it's not quite what I wanted. It's like it's yes, but Mars going through the fifth tends to be quite inspired, quite good in terms of relationship energy, especially sexually, but when it's in Cancer, it's not in good dignity. Um, Mars is also ruling your second house where we have the North Node, and that can be something to do with family or your wealth. And also for Pisces in general, you're kind of challenged in this lifetime to be an independent source of abundance for yourself, an independent source of wealth. Doesn't mean it can't come from other sources. It just means that the second house for you is ruled by this Mars. So there may also be something around business or entrepreneurial activity or creative activity that you're having to grapple with that's not quite emerging the way that you thought it would. Certainly, the South Node in the eighth house also reflects that relationships of intimate nature are not necessarily working out the way that you thought they would. Um, the eighth house is intimacy. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't have a relationship. It means that it's not working out the way you thought, um, or that you're having to let go of certain concepts or ways of being in relationship in an intimate way in order to show up in relationship. And we have Venus ruling that eighth house and ruling your third house of choice, ruling the Uranus, which is opposed by Mercury, which is ruled by Mars. So all of this is suggesting that there might be some new way of seeing these questions, whether they be about love relationships or about your creative enterprises. Venus is in the 10th, and so your sense of how you want to show up is highlighted. Tends to be very nice, very pleasant for connecting, especially with higher ups or with people, generally speaking, out in the world or in some work circumstance. But then Mars moves into your work area. Could be issues with colleagues, or it can be issues with employees, issues with contracts, and obstacles of all kinds. The the ninth house, and it will come back to your fifth house on the 6th of January until the 18th of April. So this is a story that keeps coming up, and that Mars will continue to go back and forth into a trine with Neptune. So there's something about yourself that you need to become aware of. There's something about you that you need to understand, or you need to become aware of self-sabotage with Neptune in the first house, of not showing up yourself the way you actually are. That's one way that that can be, especially as we've got Mercury in a trine to Neptune, trining Mars. Maybe there's something that you're not being entirely honest about. Now, Pluto has been going through your 11th house of your vision for your future, your hopes and dreams, the way that you connect with groups and associations, whether you're Pisces, Sun, Moon, or Rising. This is applying in different ways and different aspects. You can see how I describe that in the description box below the video, which is always below the video. And that Pluto is now moving into your 12th house. But before it does that, it's opposed by Mars from the 5th. So there's some aspect of yourself that needs to show up one last time, or be clarified, or be asserted, perhaps, to really get the message of that transformation, of how that vision for your life, or this vision for your future, or the way that you connect socially has shown up for you, and how it's not really that. Later, Mars, on the 4th of November, Mars moves into your 6th house. On the 19th of November, Pluto moves into your 12th house. And then it starts opposing from the Leo Aquarius axis. And that's going to show you some dynamic again between how you might sabotage yourself, or what you might need to understand more deeply about yourself, and in how you need to assert yourself, or how you might need to not so much assert yourself in your everyday life. The way that you relate to the people around you will show that, or the way that your health shows up will show that as well. Jupiter, which is your ruler, is in the 4th house, which can generally be a really favorable place. You feel very good, even when Jupiter is retrograde, even when it's not in great dignity. Jupiter is Jupiter is Jupiter. It's in the 4th house, and it makes you feel good. But it's this, again, this feeling of, yes, but I feel good, but that's because both Jupiter and Saturn, which is in your 1st house, are retrograding. Something about this dynamic between yourself and how you feel, what you need in your home, or your family or your intimate sort of psychological space, your emotional space, that is going to show up at Christmas time, so around 24, 25 December, because Jupiter will be squaring Saturn then. Jupiter retrograde, Saturn direct at 14 degrees. And again in June, the 9th, 10th of June, I think it is, where Saturn will be in Aries, beginning of Aries, and Jupiter will be at the beginning of your fifth. That, I think, is when you're going to find that love relationships or issues with children go a little bit more smoothly, because Jupiter will be trining your first house, trining your ninth house of your, again, your sort of vision for yourself and your sense of purpose, perhaps. And it will be in its exalted favorite sign of Cancer. So whatever's going on that feels sticky right now, keep digging in, dig to yourself. You've got the Saturn in your first house asking you to change, take responsibility, really show up for yourself. Learn what no means. Learn learn where to put the yes and where to put the no, and especially learn your utmost sincerity, which is, again, I think what also this Saturn, sorry, the Mars opposite Pluto, and the trine from Mars to Mercury, and the sextile from Mercury to Pluto, all of that, and then the trining and the sextiling with kind of wavy gravy Neptune in your first house. So there's some things that need to be sorted here. And also we've got Uranus in the third in opposition to Mercury. This is an opportunity to show up sincerely, drop whatever manipulation might be there, if any, or drop any sense that this needs to look a particular way at whatever is going on in this moment, and get into that place of trusting this is a new moon in the ninth house of what do I have faith in, and really putting yourself out there and saying, okay, Scorpio, fearless, full of faith. I recognize that there's something bigger than me operating here, and I surrender to it. That doesn't mean I don't take action. It means I surrender to this bigger, wiser energy, and I participate fully in it, but without trying to micromanage any of that. So good luck with all of that, Pisces. I do look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you want to know more about your 2025, I'm going to be, by the time of the new moon, I'll be putting out my 2025 videos, but I will be asking a small fee for each of them because I don't monetize my channel, and this is one way for me to earn a living. So thanks very much for being here, and do please subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. Please like the video because it helps me to let other people know that it's worth watching. So if you did indeed like it. So thanks a million, and I'll see you in the next video.